And we are live here today at Ishook Comics Podcast. Very shortly, Ishook Comics Podcast will have its own comic channel here at the YouTube Center and Spectrum. At the same time, it will be also available on Ishook TV and all other social media platforms as well. We are here today with our good friend, our guest, the holy man, Josh Adams. And our good co-host, BL Blankenship, Ishook Comics editor-in-chief, a friend, loyal, cool, and awesome as always, bringing us the best of the peoples in the comic industry, except for one, which his name will not be named because it's unholy to name his name. He knows who I'm talking about. There was one guy who was messed up in the comics. Anyway, so we're here with Josh Adams, a good friend of ours now. Every time we get a new guy coming on board, a new, podcast, a new guest, they're new friends. That's how I like to see it. So we're here. Josh, open up. Tell us who you are. Like I said in the beginning, in the green room. I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing. Teach me, bask us with who you are, what you've done, where you're from.
Well, as you all know, my name is Josh Adams. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winner, um, a second generation comic book artist. My father was Neil Adams, who I think most people in the comic industry would be familiar with him. And I've worked in the comic industry since I was probably 17 years old. And here I am now.
Wow.
And you did stuff for WWE, DC Comics, all kinds of Doctor Who.
I've worked for DC, Marvel, IDW. I've done some work for the BBC, Sci-Fi Channel. I've done kids books. I've done movie projects. I've forgotten more things than I've actually done.
It's like the old age thing. I forgot things that you have just begun to learn.
What all have you did for DC and specifically right off?
What have I done for DC?
Characters.
I worked on Justice Society. I worked on House of Mystery. I did some pinup and cover work for Batman and Green Arrow and World's Finest. I'm not sure what else I've done for them.
Dude, you're hitting the classics. Those are awesome. You're not like naming the one-offs. It's like, man, it's the hot stuff. There, when you did Justice Society, and my boy Wesley Dodds in it anywhere? Did it Sandman, the original Sandman?
Not the one I worked on. No, we had.
It's rare.
Yeah. We had who do we have? Was it Dr. Midnight?
Yes.
And we had who's on the team?
Wildcat.
Yes, Wildcat 2, the newer Wildcat. It's Wildcat 2. It's one of the Wildcats. I don't know how many there are at this point. There's a few generations. It was sort of the younger generation of Justice Society characters.
All right. Now, it wasn't like post Wesley Dodds where they brought in the Black Canary, was it? Because she took his place, I think.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Yeah, but you had her man, Green Arrow. You did. That's cool. What were you in for Marvel?
Marvel, I worked on the Astonishing X-Men motion comic book. I didn't do any published comic work for them, but yeah, I worked on the motion comic stuff.
What does that mean, motion comics? Teach us. What does that mean for people who don't know?
It's sort of, it's a type of animation, but rather than animating things, completely from scratch, you use the comic material, the actual comics themselves, and you kind of animate that art.
Oh, it's like the YouTube. They have that like reading off the comic kind of thing, and they're like you're zooming in, popping out.
Sort of. There's additional art that's done for it to kind of create more, actual motion and animation in it than just kind of moving cameras in and out and things like that. It's kind of creating a very kinetic experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
There is a Red Sonja movie that you can get on Tubi that's like that. It's like a motion comic movie with her in it.
It was an interesting experiment. I don't know if it found the audience they were hoping for, but it was fun to work on. I got to work on the late John Cassidy's art, and obviously, Joss Whedon's writing makes for fantastic storytelling experience. So it was cool to work on it. But yeah, that was my lone Marvel Comics experience.
That is neat. Do you have any thoughts of like jumping in and telling Jim Lee, man, I can take this Hush 2 off your hands? I know that you're struggling with it. Because there's delays like crazy. And I don't know. I've heard somebody say that DC delays things all the time. I don't know that that's true or not. I know that that I'm waiting forever and a day on all of my Fire and Ice stuff from Dynamite, that artist has taken, I mean, months and months and months and months to get you the next book.
It's I'm always excited about different projects, but I think with Jim Lee and Hush 2, I think that story works in large part because Jim Lee's drawing it. So
Yeah.
I'd hate to have to be a fill-in artist on a story like that, or something.
Big shoes.
Especially, I mean, that original Hush series, that was a huge event story, for DC Comics. I remember when it came out, they were doing contests to figure out who Hush was and all sorts of like side promotional things. It was just such a big deal. So yeah, Jim Lee can take his time. I think we can wait for it because it's worth it.
Who wrote for you when you were with DC?
Who wrote for me? House of Mystery was, oh my gosh,
Just any that you remember.
I'm just totally blanking on names right now. Oh, this is gonna be bad because they'll find this podcast and they'll be like, I can't believe you couldn't remember.
Just name the ones that you remember.
Who was I working with on Justice Society? It was, oh my god, no, you're gonna have to come back to me on the writing.
Okay, all right, yeah. I'm excited about going to this this Heroes Con that I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that Dan Jurgens was going to be there, I was like, man, that's it. I love it. I've got those Batman First Night issues. They're like oversized. I love that. Benny, he did Death of Superman, if that sounds familiar at all. But a lot of stuff he's did. But
who doesn't know Death of Superman, honestly?
Yeah, Jerry Conway's down there and everything. I mean, just a whole ton of people that I just know. Artists that I like. I like Aaron Campbell really well. I like Jeff DeCal. All this photorealistic, stuff. I love lighting. Light and shadow, that means a lot to me. It's lots of neat stuff, but it's jam packed. It's in Charlotte, North Carolina, and so people were telling me that they think it's the best Comic-Con, like, period, because it's just writers and artists. It's not like the comic people. Like almost everything that's called Comic-Con, moreover, is like the weird kid pushed in the corner. It's like it's just all comics, which I guess like the alternative comic things are that, but then that's a different kind of comic thing altogether.
The nice thing about I would say Heroes Con is even if you're a guest, it is, because it is all kind of artist alley and artists and writers and things like that. You kind of can go and be a professional and also be a fan.
Yeah.
You sit behind the table and you look down the line and you see who the people that you're next to are, and it's like, oh man, I can't wait to take a few minutes and walk around and see all these people and hang out. And it's just, incredible experience. I've enjoyed. I've been 2 times, and it was awesome.
That's awesome.
You know what I like about all the individuals who we had on our podcast for comics? The genuine love of each other's work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is very rare, I can tell you. It doesn't exist in a religious sects. It doesn't exist in most, like, I think, industries where there's genuine love for each other and others' works. And wow, did you do that? Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Now, Benny,
like, I don't see that. By the way, one second, Ben. I don't personally see that in literally 90% of industries. Like, and religious, groups. It's like the love of each other's success of creating stories is there. It's like unbelievable. I'll be honest with you. Ben, what do you want to say? Am I wrong? Or am I right?
I wanted to say, like, in the literary world, because I've written like all this independent stuff, especially Western horror and all that. You totally have that there. People are reading each other's books, sharing them. I've been in a bunch of anthologies. People have reprinted my stories. They like them so much. I like reading theirs most of the time too, and they do well. you know, it's kind of like we're all swimming together. Every now and then somebody will get out ahead and all that. Like the biggest deal in Western horror, Joe Lansdale. You probably heard of him, Josh. He's did like a lot of comic book stuff too. Jonah Hex, and he wrote Batman the Animated Series episodes and all that. Super nice guy, super approachable. It's cool stuff. Music is on and off. There's either people with an attitude or there's people that aren't. Like I've been on the Kentucky Headhunters bus, and it's like you've lived next door to them all your life. They're just super nice guys, and then there's people that think they're a big deal that aren't. So.
It's the way. I mean, again, going back to the comic community, it's quite the family. So
definitely, I see it very much.
Hey, do you too?
Yeah, it especially. I mean, for me, because my father was a comic book artist, I grew up in this industry, so I've had people who have known me long before I knew or understood who they were. You know, their importance.
This is Neil Adams' son right here, Josh. Somebody's asking things in like YouTube or whatever, and they said, "What are you talking about?" Talking about comics.
Yeah.
Oh, we have. I forgot. There's a message board.
Yeah, it's coming up on the side thing next to me.
Yeah, I can see it there. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So text them. What do you can text them, Ben?
No, I'm just commenting back. Live,
oh, okay.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah. It's just like we're talking about.
Yeah, but if we text them back, it'll show on the platform.
Well, I don't have a YouTube thing open. I'm just looking at it here. It's just coming.
No, if you you can post it here and goes to the channels. Anyway, I'll post it.
I don't even know how to do that.
You just type it. What do you want to say to them? Let's just type.
No, I already said it. We're talking comics.
Okay, we're talking comics.
So, who all have you wrote for the WWE?
Sorry, say that again.
What wrestlers have you?
Written for? So I did somewhere. I did. I illustrated a children's book that Mick Foley wrote for the WWE called "A Most Miserable Christmas." That was a pretty cool experience. I had always been a fan of pro wrestling and a fan of Mick Foley for sure. I did a lot of promotional work for WWE, illustrating for their ECW on Sci-Fi show, for SmackDown. I did some illustrations for a book on, like, I guess you can consider it like an encyclopedia of WWE wrestlers, and they had illustrations for each one. And so I got to illustrate lots of different wrestlers across WWE's history. It was one of those freelance jobs that just kind of fit with my interests really well. So yeah, it's been it was a cool getting to have a working relationship with that organization, because I grew up watching them.
Oh yeah. Hey, me too. And there's a huge connect between comics and wrestling too. Yep. I don't know if you know this or not. So I live just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. Do you know that Knoxville's mayor was a professional wrestler?
Yes, Mr. Glenn Jacobs. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They say he's a super nice guy and he's huge.
This is true. Yeah. You'd hate to be political opposition to a 7 foot tall, monstrous man like Kane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard he's very smart, and he's been a good mayor, and I've never met him, but I'm sure I'd be intimidated by his physical presence.
It's a nice town. The dude that runs the Comics Exchange, they know him really well and everything. That's in downtown. Knoxville's a huge area for comics. Do you know that? I mean, like, bigger than Nashville, bigger than Atlanta, and somebody was telling me bigger than Pittsburgh. We're getting more and more big name people here. Nirvana Comics is like in the center of it. They're always getting somebody. Comics Exchange over in Carnes, that's where we have Crypto. So that's just a little bit outside of Knoxville. And then in Maryville, they have the Golden Age 1942. And that's where I met Gail Simone. They had the VeggieTales guy last year, but they're always getting somebody. Mark Spears was down this year. A whole bunch of people coming down to them. But every year on Free Comic Book Day, we've got 4 different shops to do that. And then there's a lot of smaller ones, but the community all tells each other. They're like, hey, so-and-so is going to be here and so-and-so is going to be there. And I mean, I went to calling around different areas. I run around in like a 3-hour radius, because I'm like, I think you need to build up your home base. And I think that's normal to drive there. So I was in Marietta the last Free Comic Book Day doing a signing there. But now they get some cool stuff. going on. I'm going to be in Clarksville, Tennessee next month, and on and on.
Oh, that's cool. I've not spent a lot of time down in those parts, so I haven't gotten to experience it. But that's great. I'm all for the growth and expansion of the comic business. So seeing big stores, seeing them be attended by nice guests. You said the VeggieTales person was there. Was that Doug Tenenbaum?
No, it wasn't him. It was somebody else. Now he does live in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where he is. He's not Clarksville. He's down below that. But no, it wasn't him. It was the other person that made the VeggieTales and all that. But no, Doug's did a bunch of stuff, Earthworm Jim and all that. And we've talked before. But yeah, I've been out in Gallatin, or no, I'm sorry, I was at the Marietta thing when they had Joe Quesada at Nirvana Comics during Free Comic Book Day. That's when I was just over near Nashville. I was at a shop up there, and it's Gallatin, and it's Town Square Comics. They are really busy. They get like 300 people running through like a day or whatever. It was like a rainy, nasty day, and it's like, I'm so sorry. We normally have people than that. I did like the best there probably than any other place I've ever set up and sell stuff. I had like a kid-friendly comic, and they had a ton of families with little kids in, and there's not a ton of options for that. So that worked well there. It's kind of just where you are. And Marietta horror stuff sells better. They've got a guy that does like a whatnot stream to people in California, and they want like violent, comics. And I've got something like that coming out later.
That's interesting. That's very cool. Yeah, I know Doug pretty well. Met him at a couple conventions, and he's a good guy. And it's one of those communities where you get to kind of know everybody, and everyone's pretty friendly with each other. And there's not much reason for negativity or animosity among comic creators. We're all trying to just do this thing we've loved for years. And speaking of Joe Quesada, one of my first comic, you could call it a job. I was an intern at Marvel Comics in the Marvel Knights office when I was in high school. So that was pretty awesome. I got to see Joe Quesada quite a few times. Do the grunt work of being an intern, but still one of the coolest experiences ever. You're walking around the offices of Marvel Comics every day. So
yeah,
pretty fun.
How long does it take for you to do a comic or put out one issue?
I think if you're penciling and inking, these days a lot of digital art. I think it's about a month. You'd say it takes to do a comic book, to 24 page comic. Yeah.
So 48 pages should be done in 2 months easily.
There's no easily, is there?
No, based not easily,
this is such a baited question for him.
I
know it's not easily, but based on your determination or understanding, right?
2 months. 2 months, you can. Again, it depends on if you have an artist who's doing penciling, inking, doing all the line art and coloring. It varies, but if you're tasking someone to do the line art for a job, I'd say 48 pages in 2.5 months, is probably
makes sense,
doable.
reasonable, right?
Yeah. And again, it also depends on what's in the book. If there's a lot of big splash page action scenes, sure. But if you've got millions of people on one side fighting millions of people on another side, and there's going to be this crazy clash, and you got to draw every little person, it might take a little longer.
Well, yeah, I can understand if you're doing a heavy, I know in the manga world, they basically, they do I guess one series. And then when they do the heavy series, they take a break. They all of a sudden have something else prepared, like a recap kind of. Yeah. And then they draw that stuff up. And then all of a sudden they jump back into the actual, fight sequences again. So they have these kind of switch offs. So I guess they have two teams.
Sure. And manga storytelling is very different from, I guess you could say, Western comic storytelling, where
so okay, one second. I know you're gonna say something, but it just came to my head. Why is it that manga's beating the US comic style, like the Western comics? What is
Um,
the why is like
I think
if they're beating us, then why not make it in their style? Just adopt their style already.
I mean, that is a very layered question. So with manga, you have two formats, right? You have your, um, I guess you could call it a magazine format where it's chapters of multiple different stories, your Shonen Jump kind of thing, where you get 5 or 6 stories in one book. And there's short chapters, I couldn't tell you how many pages there are off the top of my head, but you get that monthly. And so people can pick up a collected version of like 5 or 6 stories of that month's chapter. And then you have the graphic novel formats, which collects the stories into a larger format. They are printed small, typically a lot in black and white.
Yeah. So no colorist.
Yeah. You'll get
You
tone.
mean manga?
Yeah, manga.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're black and white, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Most
you'll get tone, you'll get things like that. It's all very well done. But what comes to the US from that is typically the collected editions, the longer graphic novel style. And part of the success is that they are in bookstores, more. I mean, at least in the previous 20 years. Not so much that bookstores are a big thing these days.
right.
And then part of it is there's also the adaptation, that mangas will also become animes. And so you have a very synchronized structure for people to follow. So, for instance, I watched the early seasons of the show Attack on Titan, which was an
Yeah.
anime.
Yeah.
I was so sucked into that story, I didn't want to wait for season 2. So I bought more of the mangas and I got to read the mangas. So I got sucked in from one thing into the other format. And, that made me, that made the property a little more money. But here in the States, in North America, I can't speak for Europe, our movies and our comics don't actually line up very well.
No.
No, they
They
don't.
don't. They're very different from like what you see in the movies. Good, entertaining, but you can't go to the comic store and then pick up issues of what's going on in the movies. So there is a disconnect there. I think it's harder for the comic business, especially with really long form periodicals, to create easy jumping on points for readers. And it's a little hard for readers to commit. You go to a comic store, if you're a comic store and you're lucky enough to get someone who had just seen a movie or someone who wants to try some new comic books, it's hard to get them to commit to a $5 or $6 cover price tag every month for a comic book. So that's tough. And then we haven't had a Comixology or something, a digital format that's been very successful in a while, since Amazon basically destroyed Comixology. So we only just now, in fact, I just saw an article today that the original creators of Comixology are launching a new digital platform. I believe it's called Neon Ichiban, which will be a place where people can publish their comics digitally online. That might make Western comics more accessible to people in ways that they haven't been, since the early days of Comixology. But it's difficult to compare the comics we have now with the manga that's in Japan, because it just, on so many levels, it's so different. So it's tough.
I agree.
Yeah.
You,
And
you,
Bottom
you,
line is, I see them beating the Western
you
comics.
Sure.
know, like The Boys and The Walking Dead and things like that were popular. It's caused more like graphic novel sales and all those to do well. To the same and opposite effect, the Jonah Hex movie, which I've never seen, was supposedly so bad that it hurt Jonah Hex comic sales, even though Jonah Hex is awesome. The movie, that's like the Daredevil movie, was garbage, but then they made the series that was fantastic. It was truly Daredevil.
Yeah, and the series, as I mentioned before, and as you're mentioning here, so so much more accurate to the character, obviously changing some things, but you can watch that series and then you can go to a comic store and tell someone, hey, I watched the Daredevil series on TV and I want to read more Daredevil stories, and they can point you to, the Brian Michael Bendis run, or the Frank Miller run, or all these classic stories that really do feel like they're in line with what you just watched. So you can see how that dynamic does actually breed success. I do want to stress, we are saying that manga is beating comics. Yeah, but it's also not a competition, right? It would be great to see comics find ways to adapt some of the things that manga is doing to be more successful. It just requires such an upheaval of the current system of publishing and retail sales. And if you're a comic store owner, that's definitely scary. Comic store owners are surviving on pretty narrow margins. And so to have one of the two big publishers go, hey, we're going to shake things up and try and change how we publish comics, that little shift could cause 5 or 10% of the comic book stores to go out of business. So
well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to say which comic store I went to, and Ben knows the comic store.
Yeah.
I went there out of Ben's advice. Literally 3 people left in line.
No, it's online that this happened. You
Yeah.
can go, it's one of the biggest comic stores there is Midtown.
Yeah,
there is. And they had a signing with Scott Snyder.
I was the last 3. They said, you're out. You can't come. I'm like, but there's only 3 left. Like, the only 3 you're not gonna let us in? I mean, I could get it if there was like 10, 15 behind us.
This is like a Larry David,
but it's
episode.
Literally 3. So you're just taking away a person who can have been, promoting your place. Yeah. It's the first time I ever went to a comic store in my life. Right, I went there because he said go get a cameo with
Scott Snyder.
Scott Snyder, our good friend,
Absolute Batman.
Yeah, so.
Number 9.
So it was the first time I went there. I said, dude, I'll take a comic. And then one guy was saying, oh, if you get a comic, his signature's worth 3-4 times. I'm like, yeah, it's worth it. It's a business deal. You go buy a comic, you get a signature, you get a cameo. Maybe we do it live. How you doing? How's everything? I'm from Ishook Comics, and we're trying to get into the game. Can you come on a podcast? He's still welcome on a podcast. I would love to have him on a podcast if possible. But for 3 people, you kick me out?
Like, literally, he said there's just 3 more of us, because they said the line ends here. The guy walked down the line and he stops at Benny and he's like, hey man, the line ends here. And Benny's standing there with 2 guys and he's like, you can't make an exception for 3 people.
And not just that, he comes back again. Yeah. I didn't have this recorder. I'm like, okay, he comes back again. He says, why are you still here?
I saw the other part on video. He had his video out, and I mean, it's because he's just talking, and then the dude happens to walk up, and he's like, "Get lost. The line ends here." And then he's like, "Well, but there's 3 of us." It's I mean, that's they're not going to stand there 20 minutes. Everybody was shaking hands, and Pretty
well, my real point is in the business aspect. You can see I made videos. So in 2015, we exhibited in a huge digital. It was called the Digital Book World. Right now, it's not in New York anymore. It's in Tennessee, I think. Different company bought out that event, whatever it was. So the Digital Book World, I was there the first time, 2013. I met LeVar Burton, and then I started getting into the whole, wow, look at this digital aspect of the book industry. We created our own ebook app. Right now, we're revamping our ebook app in order to, accommodate the new tech we have. And then what ends up happening is, what I predicted, the Barnes and Nobles is going to fail because it was such a huge push of ebooks. E-publishing by Amazon and by Overdrive and Kobo. It was like, wow, you got to be there. And then now, by the way, there's a decline on ebooks, just for you to know. Huge decline on ebooks. People are now buying more hard copy again. Yeah. So, and then what ends up happening? Barnes and Nobles comes back to the space. So I predicted Barnes and Nobles fail, and the bankruptcy and the crash, and then they were literally on the slither of breathing. They're like, like you're breathing, going up and down, and you don't have your floaty, and you're like, and at the end, there's a new thing that they're opening like 90 Barnes and Nobles now in New York and around across the country. This new CEO,
Yeah.
has now made Barnes and Nobles more of an experience.
Yeah.
So my point is, if I go to a comic book store, by the way, it can look like it's the, no offense, like the dirtiest, like it's the New York City subway.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went to those comic stores. I went to the wrong comic store, the first one. I went to Lexington one. And
Okay.
then I went to the Grand Central. I didn't read it was the Lexington one.
It's Grand
Yeah.
Central Station.
Yeah, it was Grand Central. I didn't notice the small print. So whatever. So I went to the wrong one. I walked there 15, 20 minutes from the Diamond District because I was there meeting my friend over there.
Yeah.
You know, a big social media influencer and watches. And then I come back here, and then all of a sudden I'm going to the Grand Central one, and then I'm like, why these comic stores look like they're the subway? Like it's so
Not all
dirty.
do, but not all do, but yeah,
Yeah, but what the ones that I went so far, okay.
a lot do.
Yeah.
Now, and I will tell you something. When I went to Japan, we went to Japan to make deals in Japan with the book industry.
Yep.
When you go to a bookstore in Japan, wow, what an experience!
Sure.
It's like such a beautiful experience. You walk in there, you go through the floors, you see the way the books are laid out, you see the way the aesthetics are. You don't want to leave this bookstore. You literally don't want to leave this bookstore. And the comic section, the manga, that everything that is available there, just the aesthetics of why are we simply still living in the old ages and not creating a comic book store that's more of an experience that makes us newbies want to, wow, like, and get committed to one comic series and start buying. Like, you're losing customers, you're losing followers, you're losing, how do you say it, people who are willing to convert themselves to your stories, to your ideology, your messaging. Like, why? I just don't get it, honestly.
It's again another layered problem. I would love to see comic stores create more of an experience for the readers. It's or potential customers, or whatever you want to consider. And it's difficult. I think there's also a cultural divide between the nature of a Japanese bookstore versus something in the U.S. I'd love to see that advance. I'd love to see that grow here in the U.S. But the history of comic stores is a very organic thing. Most comic stores were started by people who collected comic books and then realized they had this mass of comic books and that they needed a way to do something with it. They would have swap meets, essentially, which were like the early days of conventions. And it just went from having tables at these swap meets to having actual storefronts, because prior to comic stores and prior to the direct market, comics were sold at newsstands and at grocery stores and at toy stores and things like that.
Yeah.
Along with newspapers and magazines. And it was a good system, for the most part, selling comics on the newsstand. But there was also corruption. There was also the growth of these novelty comic shops, and it forced a change in how comics were sold and how people consumed the comic books, because it was these collectors who weren't necessarily businessmen or who weren't necessarily store owners. Some of your oldest comic shops really came from this organic experience, and that was not necessarily hey, I'm a businessman getting into the comic book world. It's just, I have a lot of comic books, I'm going to resell some of these, and I want to also sell new stuff. And that doesn't necessarily lend itself to being on the cutting edge of how business is done. So I think that we have, I think that what Marvel and DC, being the preeminent publishers and who are basically responsible for comic stores staying alive, I think, when it comes to trying to innovate, they're doing it with sort of a house of cards industry, where you have to say, we're going to make this change and we want to see comic stores make these changes. But, everyone is very worried about whether they can stay open, and again, I'd love to see, comic stores create a greater experience for especially new readers. But it's one of those things where it's been such a tenuous and scary economic system, the comic industry, that getting stores across the nation to embrace that sort of change is not as easy as one would hope.
Well, yeah, definitely. I see what you're saying on that point, but at the same time, we have people like us that can create a store. If
Yeah.
let's say I would know people will follow, if I would do a store and I would have
Mhm.
1,000 people coming every month or every, and
Yeah.
buying, yeah, I would do it. I would do like a Japanese meets Western culture kind of comic book
You realize
store.
how much money that would be? I'm just saying that is a lot of money. I mean, just the different comics that are coming in, and there's some comics,
No,
by the
no.
way,
What we would do, well, listen. What we do is
because
in the book industry, we don't pay up front. It's consignment. You put your comics here, we sell, we pay. That's
Yeah,
how it
but
should work.
that's not how the comic book industry tends to work.
amen. That's
Yeah.
right, amen. It's
We
not.
used to, the comic industry back when it was on the newsstands would work with returns, but when the direct market started, the return system ended. It went from, there was affidavit returns, and then eventually we realized that the comic stores and some of the comic collectors were falsifying their affidavit returns and were selling books without having to pay the publishers. So the return system basically ended in the comic industry because of that.
Mm.
And we've never gone back since. I mean, there have been a few rare situations where a publisher has really, really wanted to get a book on the shelves in high numbers and has said, all right, issue 1, we are allowing returns, just to hopefully get comic stores to stock more and try and get more readers. But it hasn't really worked. And that's been a sticking point to what has kept the industry alive, but also kept the industry from growing. Because if you're a store owner, every book you buy is a book that you pay for, and
Mm.
it's tough. It's really tough. And
And
the,
they have
the
variant covers, and that sticks with
yeah,
it.
variant covers, it pushes things even harder. They've tried ways to incentivize it, where stores can do their own variant exclusives and things like that. But yeah, that's a big burden on a store to say, hey, this new book we're coming out with has 3 different variant covers with different, 1 in 100. You'll have to order 100 copies to get 1 copy of this one special variant cover. And it's like, oh gosh, you guys are really putting a lot of pressure on the retailers here, and the retailers aren't rolling in it right now.
No
So
doubt. But at the same time, don't forget, if you do a manga centric kind of bookstore or
yeah,
store, then you're going to get a lot more fans coming in.
But they'll go for the
possibly.
manga. We'll go for the manga. So you worked with DC more, and honestly, like I read more DC. I
Mhm.
skew more that way. I think that Marvel's got some hot stuff right now. I think that their Spider-Man Predator is probably one of their hotter books at the
Mhm.
moment. Um, the thing that I'm excited about with Marvel, and it's here's the thing. So, and there may be like one dude that's the exception, but overall, everyone in the entire universe that likes the Punisher, they've made them wildly foaming at the mouth, mad. Some may never come back no matter what they do, but they've got like a 5-part. The real Punisher, Frank Castle, he's coming back from Weird World. He has amnesia. So they have that coming out in like September and all that. I would like to see DC rise. I really would. And the absolute universe stuff, they've got that rocking hard. But man, this is what I believe, and I want you to tell me if you think different, okay?
Okay.
So people have totally accepted, they have embraced the absolute Batman. It's like one of their top selling things. It's beating Marvel. I think the other thing that people have embraced, and by other people, I also mean me specifically, is the Batman and the Penguin movie and series, the dark, gritty, adult, red band,
Okay.
Batman. I think that would be hot if that was made into a comic series, and if they would make it more that way. Do you think that? Do you think that people that,
I think that I guess I have 2 schools of thought.
okay.
Um, One, what I want to see from both Marvel and DC is that every character they have that is like a guaranteed seller, right? Make sure you have a comic that is a series that is one title that's going to keep going, that's not going to revert to number ones over and over again, is not going to constantly switch directions, is not going to, go off in wild and crazy, bizarre things that'll make it hard for people to jump onto. Give me one Batman title that is consistent, 12 issues a year, without fail. At the beginning of the story, Batman is functionally Batman, and by the end of the story, Batman remains functionally Batman. Give me that. I don't care what age range you go for. Do that. If you have that, then you can have other titles. You can have Absolute Batman. You could have The Batman. You could have Detective Comics that can go in other directions and be more experimental, as long as any time a new reader comes into the store and says, I want to read Batman, you can say, this is Batman. This is a book that no matter what issue you are, you can jump on it, you can read it, you can enjoy Batman. If they say, I saw that movie, The Batman, do you guys have comics like that? You can say, sure, we've got a series called The Batman. But if you're looking for the long form, every month is a story Batman, this is the main title.
I like that. And of course, consistently too, that you've got to have Superman and Wonder Woman up there, because those are their big sellers, and that's what keeps DC on top. You hear people that are negative and ugly towards comics, and Kelly Sue DeConnick really got it handed to her hard over Aquaman. I don't think I could write a hit Aquaman, and I'm a good writer, but Aquaman would be like, I think that would be a harder sell. I've never really followed it. But I mean, I think that would be rougher than like a Batman or a Superman, that if you because everybody's kind of familiar with those characters. It's like you'd say to me, name an Aquaman villain, and I'd say Black Manta, and you'd say name another one, and it's like I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, I think that the movie-going audience will support that kind of notion, because I don't think you're going to find a film company, and I don't think you're going to find an audience who's going to want to see an Aquaman 10. They're not going to stick with that character for 10 movies. They may like the first one, they may like the second one, but they're not going to be committed for that long. It may work better as an ensemble character, which I think it does do. So one of the things I learned working at a comic store as a teenager, and was told to me just in the basic economics, is if we don't have a good Batman book, a good Spider-Man book, a good Superman book, a good Wonder Woman book, and a good X-Men book every month, then we are not making money.
Do you mean any Spider-Man, or do you mean Amazing Spider-Man? Because that there's a big call for bring him and Mary Jane together, even though I know there's another Spider-Man where they have a kid and they are brought back together. So you can have the one where it's Peter, Paul, and Mary. No offense to the band. or you can have it to where him and Mary Jane are still married, like.
From when I was given that information, I believe it's those namesake titles, those long-standing ones that everyone knows. You need to have those titles producing good quality work every month for your comic stores to be doing well. And that's could have shifted. I mean, Avengers could replace X-Men in that title, in that thing now. Spider-Man always needs to sell. Spider-Man always needs to be doing well. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, absolutely the same. But you get to those characters, you get to your Aquamans, you get to, Martian Manhunter and all those things. Maybe the answer to those things is not having an ongoing series for Aquaman and not having an ongoing series for Martian Manhunter or whatever. And say, when a writer or creator has an idea for those characters, do a miniseries with them. Do a miniseries when it merits that. That way you're not, lining your shelves up with books that are not going to be a benefit to a comic book store. And when a writer comes to you with a miniseries idea, you can focus on it. You can say, for the next 4 months, we're going to have a 4-issue Aquaman arc that's going to be a big deal for us. And then the retailers can say to the people who come to the store, you should check out this Aquaman miniseries. And readers won't be scared off by it, because they know they're not going to have to stick with something for 12 months or whatever, or, worry about if they got to jump onto some new thing. or sorry, jump onto some long form thing. They just know all I have to do is buy 4 issues to get the story and enjoy it.
I really appreciated the last Spider-Man movie. And I know there's people that want to turn around now. They've decided it's not as good as they thought it was. It was amazing. It fixed every stupid thing that was wrong with the other. It fixed the Sandman Venom thing, which when I heard that one was coming out, I'm like, it's too fast. It's like, what? Why are they doing for the Batman? I don't know what they're planning on doing. But as a writer and a guy that's written horror and all that, I said in that world, I would totally make it like the Mad Hatter, because you could totally go that dark and just have Batman just beat the snot out of him, and you could have all the other stuff going on with the mob and Penguin and whatnot, and it wouldn't seem excessive. Have this hypnotist psycho that likes young girls, going around, and Batman just beat him half to death, and everybody would be a fan.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I will say I'm not someone who leans into dark gritty. I know that's weird because my dad was the person who made Batman darker and grittier.
Well, he brought back the pulp after the 1966 series because they'd parodied it, and it was a thing of beauty. And you do know what would fix DC if you made a phone call right now, and if you said, "Dad, I want you to go in and tell Jim Lee to get out of your chair," he wouldn't do it, would he?
Yeah. Well, my dad's dead, so I don't think it was going to help. But no, actually, Dad worked pretty well with Jim over the years. My dad had a lot of dealings with DC even when he wasn't doing comics for them, so they had a pretty good relationship. But I don't dislike what DC is doing. I think that they're trying things. They're also under the umbrella of Warner's. And, Warner's has their fingers in things, and they have to, make the final say on a lot. So I think that they're working under very strict parameters. But going back to what I was going to say before, I'm not necessarily a proponent for dark, gritty Batman that is beating people bloody and having an excessive amount of violence. I grew up on the Batman animated series by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. And I feel like that really set a standard for being able to tell, grounded, realistic stories, even in scenarios where characters had a lot of bizarre flair and over the topness to them. It really was such a perfect balance of Batman. And part of that was, they knew to lean on some of the most classic Batman stories and build around those. And then take stories that didn't work and find ways to improve them and find ways to really ground them. So, if you could tell me that, 12 issues a year, I'm going to be getting something that was, reminiscent of the animated series in terms of storytelling, I would be buying Batman without questioning who the heck was writing it or on it. I'd be ready.
Do you know that Marvel is making a miniseries that is based off of the Spider-Man cartoon series from the 90s?
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, they are. It's I guess it's going to be like more issues of it or whatever. So I mean, that's not bad. I watched that. I thought it got a little weird in some parts of it, but I mean, nothing could touch Batman the animated series. Clayface, the introduction story, which supposedly this new movie is gonna draw a lot from, which makes me like it. I love that with Daggett, and he came in looking like the woman. He's knocking people out of the way, and when are you gonna tell them about me? And it was awesome.
Yeah, I loved that animated series. I was so hooked on it as a kid, and I remember when the collected DVDs came out, I got the whole collection and rewatched the whole series, and it's just like it's just as good as I remembered. It didn't drop off at all.
Do you like Terry McGinnis?
I'm sorry? Do
you like Terry McGinnis?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That was neat too. And they had the same voice actor for Batman, which legitimized it.
Yeah.
Question. All these Batman versions are coming out. Are these licensed by people, or how does it work?
The comics?
Yeah, like all these versions, all these adaptations.
Well, they're all published by DC, so it's all owned. It doesn't have to be licensed or anything like that. It's owned by DC.
Scholastic might have did some kids stuff or something, maybe.
Oh, with Batman, I'm sure that there's a partnership and maybe a licensed format, but I have a feeling that if DC Comics were working with Scholastic, they're probably working with them primarily for their distribution system. because they have a fantastic distribution system. You
Yeah.
know, the best in some of the best in all of publishing. So it
No
would
doubt.
behoove them to produce, work with Scholastic in hopes that it also brings more people towards the regular books.
Right. So it's not like we can go and ask, okay, we want to license the character, create our comic with Batman or something like that.
You can talk to DC. I don't
That'd be
know
huge
if they would
money.
say, yeah.
You're talking
Uh,
like Batman Spawn. I mean, that's
No, I
like
remember reading an article. The new person who became in charge of DC wanted to actually license the characters. I mean, because think about it, those characters are licensed to, the Mortal Kombat video game.
Yeah, those are more traditional licenses, the video games, and to an extent, you could even say that the movies are licensed. Granted, Warner Brothers owns the comic book publisher, so they own the license. But like the Marvel movies, up until MCU took over and started making movies, used to be licensed out. Used to be
Right. Sony still holds a license with Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, there is getting a license. It's really the purpose of it. Like, does a license conflict with a copyright? Because that's more of a legal question, or just
No, my thing was more like you answer the question. Like these movies, they use they create a different storyline from Batman, right?
Yep.
But they ultimately have the license to have a person called Batman with the same
Yep.
design or sequence, and then you have the same thing with Superman. Obviously, the Superman logo of Superman is a logo license under DC.
Yeah. Now,
And obviously,
now if again, say Mortal Kombat were to feature Superman or Batman, the license to use that character would be all encompassing of things like logos and etc. So
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, there's
They
been a
would
few
be-
that did Lego. Legos did the superhero
yeah,
games.
Lego did, yeah, and I'm very curious with how that works, because I mean they went as far as Warner's producing a Lego Batman movie.
Yeah.
So is that in my mind, then that is like a reciprocal license. They would have to get a license from Lego to use the Lego characters and the name, but
Yeah,
they would
that's
be
how
producing the
But
movie.
they had a ton of They had Condiment Man in it.
Yeah. Well, but see, okay, so if with the Lego Batman movie, because it is produced by Warner Brothers, it doesn't matter which characters they use. They're only getting the license for Lego from Lego.
Yeah.
Whereas
So it was reverse. It wasn't Lego game because Lego.
to produce, all right, so to produce
So I'm
the
saying,
Lego,
wasn't the Batman character in Lego movies a separate character in a different movie from Lego? I don't think it started as Lego Batman. It was he was a separate character. He was like
It
a
was the Lego
cameo.
movie. His
Yeah,
name,
he
the
was in the
Lego movie.
Lego
yes, he was in the
movie
Lego movie.
itself.
Yeah.
So
now,
there it would be Lego asking for the Batman license.
yeah. Now, I mean, again, you have to see who produced the Lego movie.
You want to
Was
check it
Lego
out?
movie produced by Warner's?
And then they've got the video games, and then there's also Marvel Lego video games and everything like that where you
Yeah,
can
but I think
their
those
own.
came out
And Star
later.
Wars.
Yeah.
Let's see who produced the Lego movie. All right, so Warner Brothers produced the Lego movie.
Okay.
So that
DC.
Warner's owns DC. So yeah, the Lego movie is produced by Warner. So those licenses were all within that umbrella anyway. So they didn't really have to worry about
So
having to deal with
interesting.
all.
So they just went to Lego and say, "We want to make these movies. Can we use your Lego concept?"
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That-
It wasn't the
yeah,
reverse. Wow.
And they already had a working relationship, because I'm sure by that point the Lego Batman sets already existed before the movies came out.
That's true, because they had the licenses there.
Yeah.
And
But then
Warner
that would have been a
Brothers was
reverse
animated-
license. That would have been a reverse license. Lego licensing the Batman stuff.
Yeah.
Warner
make those
Brothers was
builds.
animated series. Warner Brothers was Tim Burton's Batman. Warner Brothers was Batman Returns. I mean, the list goes on and on, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, which is why Warner's ended up buying DC anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
And when did the Star Wars whole shtick come up
when did Star Wars become
with Lego? Was it post purchase by Warner Bros?
Oh,
Well, Disney bought
no,
it.
no. So yeah, Disney owns the Star Wars things. I'm pretty sure that Lego had the license for Star Wars prior to
Lucas.
from Lucas, prior to Disney buying Lego. But
Yeah, I think
buying
all these things are important
Star
because if
Wars.
you're creating content, it's all about licensing and making money at the end.
Yeah.
You want to make money from your product, at least something. I mean, and I think the licensing is where you're going to make a lot more money. I think we had this discussion with another guest where I said I rather license your characters, in my potential video games I'm going to do or potential other comics I'm going to do. Just give me your character's name. Tell me what's the criteria, how I can use the character, and that's it.
It's probably
But
strict.
Huh?
It's probably really strict. It's like here's what you can and can't do. We need you to tell us what you're going to do because Batman's not going to do anything
Well, I'm
that's
sure
not
Batman,
Batman.
yes. I'm sure the big players, yes. But I'm talking about the more independent indie creators. I don't think
yeah,
they should be strict. They should be
Oh,
more
okay,
open.
you're not
Say,
saying
give me
Marvel
give
or
me this
DC.
amount of money per year. Give me a royalties per sale on that issue that has that character. You know,
well, I will give you one of my big rules for young creators, which is have a lawyer.
that's for
Um,
sure, no doubt.
because you don't want to make deals with publishers, with licensees, without someone who can look over those types of legal documents and make sure you're protected.
No
Um,
doubt. Yeah, for sure.
like with DC, when they give out a license for a T-shirt with a Superman logo on it, those licenses are extremely strict. They're like you're buying a license to print a Superman logo on three colors of types of shirts with this length sleeve, and the license is only for 10-inch wide logos.
That's crazy.
It's all very specifically
Yeah.
handed out because they don't want to be taken advantage of. They don't want someone to be like, oh, we got a license to use the Superman logo, we're going to put it on 1,000 different products. So they're
Right.
going to define every single product. They're going to define the type of printing. They're going to define the size, even the number of shirts or whatever the item is. That's what they got them lawyers for. And it's a pain in the butt, but those protections exist for big companies as much as they exist for small publishers or creators.
No doubt, guys. We're gonna have to close this up right now,
Hey,
because
can I
yeah.
get
Wait,
this
let me
done first?
finish. First of all, here's the QR code for Josh Adams right here, guys. Okay. Ben has an announcement. He's going to be somewhere. Ben,
Oh,
can you
okay.
please tell
I
us?
can I can do that, but then I just wanted to do let me do this faster instead of like flipping through all the
Whatever it
comics
is,
I've got.
just okay, shoot.
Super excited about Heroes Con. There's going to be a whole lot of great creators there. I've got a lot of books stacked up here behind me. I'm just going to read some of these names of creators that I love you. I'm coming to see, and I've got comics. Jerry Conway, Dan Jurgens, Scott Hanna, John Workman. You know who some of these people are,
Oh yeah.
Josh. Oh man, Gene Ha. How do you say that? Is that Jose Luis Garcia Lopez?
Yep.
That's one person.
Yeah.
Daniel Warren Johnson. Boom. The other people, like I mentioned, like Aaron Campbell and all of them are going to be there. It's going to be like, hey, how you doing? I don't have anything for them to sign, but I there's a lot of people there that I like. Mike Barron, of course, is going to be there. I mean, lots of people, that I'm just going to, hey, how's it going? People have been saying, hey, stop by and see me. I'm going to run all around the place. This is my first time checking it out. It's an experience. But I was like, I need to make a name of like lists of people that it's like I gotta see so I can go ahead and get that done because I'm getting like, hey, will you hang out with me messages? And so it's like let me like do my running around and have
Very
all that.
good.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've got what
When is
booths
that
we're
going to
gonna be
be?
at.
When is that going to be?
This Saturday is when I'm going to be there, but it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is when it is. Charlotte, North Carolina. It's an annual event.
It's a great
Well,
show.
definitely, definitely. I love that. I love that. I want to also thank the 15 plus people who watched us. Every person who watches us live is always good. And we're happy that they came on board. I want to also say, hopefully, starting next week, we will make a big announcement in order to increase our live attention, where we're going to create a system where you can win $200 worth of crypto on our platform. So we're going to have this posted. I'm going to ask Ben to post it on his socials.
Yeah.
I'm going to post it on my socials. And if we can post it on everybody else's socials, that would be cool. And then we're going to have a contest that every publisher that comes on board or every person who does a Kickstarter, we're also going to have some sort of way to if they're close to the what was the thing? If they're close to the purchase, to the Kickstarter end, Ishook will pay to take them over. So anyone who has a Kickstarter and they're close and they want to come on board, all they gotta do is come on board, and we will. And it's got to be a certain minimum. Obviously, we can't do like $1,000. We're talking about like $200 to $300. If that's all you need, I'll take you over. On me. All right. So that's one thing. And again, don't forget, we're going to do a contest system, which will only be announced in the Ishook Comics podcast. And we're going to have soon a new channel separate from the Ishook. It'll still be rolling on the Ishook regular channel, but we're going to do another sub channel for Ishook Comics. So Ben can also go through his rants on the movie critiques that he does.
When this Spider-Man noir thing comes out, I'm planning on watching every episode. That's Amazon.
No doubt, no doubt
about that.
No doubt.
Yeah,
no, I'm talking about like the other movie you did, which I want to post. I didn't post it yet, but I'm going to post it I'm going to post it once I open the other channel.
Right? Oh, are you talking about the
with
Thunderbolts?
No, not Thunderbolts. The other movie that you already did one and you sent it to me. What's it called? Oh my God, we had him on the show.
I don't even remember, but I
it was Chuck's movie.
Oh, A Working Man.
Working Man. Yeah, it's number one right now on Amazon. Right?
Is it? That's It was. It's. I'm gonna get you and shoot you up type thing, and a bunch of gangsters keep coming out with guns, and more people get shot. I like that the girl that was kidnapped fought back.
Right now we got about 20. We got about 20 people watching us now, which is
hey. So I wanted to ask Josh, did you want to share anything about what you've got going on, what you've got coming up, or what you're looking to do in the future?
I am working on a creator-owned comic series. I'm talking to some publishers about it, called Culture Shock. It's about superheroes from different social subcultures, and they are a ragtag group of misfit heroes who are saved by a superpowered person who wants absolutely nothing to do with being a superhero. And he is unfortunately now stuck with this group of misfits who are constantly trying to get him to help save the day.
Wow. Cool. What would entail to publish such a thing like that?
Money.
Okay, how much money?
That's a good question. That's
how you're going to do it, though, right?
Yeah.
How you're rolling it out.
That's another good question. I've been excited also about, doing a digital first release, but I've been talking with publishers about the opportunity and seeing, what can be offered and what can be done to make it work. I don't take any of these decisions lightly.
Listen, I'm willing to work and do something with you if it's reasonable. You can
sure.
shoot me an email.
You got my email. You got my contact. We can talk.
Yeah. So Ben, shoot us a 3-way email. Listen, I don't know. I'm a newbie. We did our own comic. Mm-hmm. We want to make that successful, but I still want to build our Ishook Comics portfolio. We want to make it happen. So I would love to
hard,
do
man. Pitching is so hard.
Yeah.
Well, he's got to pitch to me. I got to know, in a sense. I'm
saying in general, it's
of course it's hard. It's also hard for me because I also want to take on a project, right? I want to take other projects, but I also want to know that I'm going to make money too. Like at least, I'm not looking for big money, greed money. I'm looking for money that covers the expenses and 2-3% profit. Even that is fine for me.
Well, my father had a saying, which is comics is a great way to lose money.
He's probably right, by the way.
Yeah.
Most likely right.
Yeah.
But I think the money is going to be if it can become more of a franchise in the future. Let's say a movie or a script, and then you sell the script and you have placement in the movie, right? That's I think where you're going to make it more. So we have to brainstorm and see whatever project you have, can that become a movie? Can that become a series? Obviously. Yeah. And if even there's a 30% chance, that's a good chance. It's a good number.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So let's do a 3-way chat on email. That's awesome. I love it. Josh, you got to come back again.
Sure.
You're very informative, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Benny, did you want to talk about the razor company that this episode is sponsored by?
The razor, what razor company?
Yeah. I typically keep my beard shorter, but I'm growing it out for Halloween. So
you make it feel bad.
Mine is like it's just like crazy. long. Yeah,
That is
I'm
later.
I'm cutting it this
I'm
fall.
not that far off, but yeah, we're good. We're good. I mean, right now we have 21 views on X, 19 views. Everybody, I'm sorry that you came up to the last moment, but we're shutting down on this podcast. More to come next week, same time, same place. We have it every Thursday night at 7 today. It's the new time is 7.
Yeah,
And
I
we
live
try to get
further
the
away
best
than
of
I
the
used
industry.
to. I
Yeah, yeah.
live for, and also I tend to eat before I come on here. Benny would make fun of me because I'd be eating every
Yeah,
single
how
time.
can you?
I'm just heading the door, and I'm
Yeah,
just like,
let's start
trying to
doing a
sit in,
barbecue while we're doing a podcast and talk about comics. Like
you know.
does that make sense? I mean, like we're in Texas barbecue land, like
I need to get a
Texas.
bag of Sun Chips just to spite him and just be like rattling them around and all. I
Anyway,
love that.
anyway, with all good, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you everybody for joining. Don't forget to subscribe to Ishook and be staying tuned for